Welcome everybody to the Focus to Win podcast. My name is Austin Chavis along with my co-host Lee Tessier.
Morning.
And we are pleased to give a special treat for all of you today. Here's a special guest that we have, former Super Bowl champion, elite level track star, and one of the top trainers in the country, Qadry Ismail, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Appreciate you guys having me.
Great to have you here.
Of course. So. Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is Qadry and Lee have a little bit of a background as well as myself. So Lee, why don't you go in and tell you about how you guys met?
So 8 years ago, a little like 8.5 now. Mm-hmm. So think of how time flies. Yeah. And you were recommended from somebody just about selling your home, and we go out to look at a couple of houses, and you're talking about training. And I was like, all right, you train fat people because I need some help here. You know, I was so out of shape, and I just want to say thank you because you've got me probably in the best shape of my life over these last 8 years, and I use it for the mental end, and then also, of course, the physical end, but. I think of those mornings at 6 a.m. I was never an early morning. We started like, all right, 6:45. Then I got down to 6. It's like, but appreciate all the training and the wisdom that you've passed on from your career of what you've learned over the years. So,
well, it's interesting that for both of you, obviously our 6 degrees of separation. When you did inquire with me, one of the things that in my mind I was thinking was like, all right, this is just a guy. He's selling me another place. He's gonna, put my stuff up, and we'll see. But what turned out within that 8 year, yes, it was and is a high quality friendship relationship, and it wasn't necessarily about, well, I can help you, but it was about the walk beside, which we can get into. But when you were saying, hey, why do you train? Why do you do what you do? And I remember oftentimes you're like, yep, this is year number 2. Yep, this is year number 3. Yep, this is year number 4. And you would say, people ask me, how come I still go to you? And the reason why is because, well, you've been there. You've been in the fire. You've understood it. And because you're the best at what you do, I'm going to you. And that meant a lot to me. It still means a lot. And it still fuels me as far as the why I do what I do.
Yeah, I was looking for, my mindset is if I'm going to get a coach, like I have business coaches, I want the best business coach that's going to get me the farthest, the fastest too. And I was like, all right, I need to have somebody I respect. I was like, all right, I'm looking at you in shape and, with your background and so forth. I'm like, all right, well, this is a no-brainer then. So if he's willing to train me, I'm willing to show up.
Amen.
And then, 8 years later, still doing the same thing.
Amen.
So it's amazing how that turned out. And I think goes back to our mindset that we talk about all the time. It's
Correct.
just consistency and persistency. And I'm like, all right, I think I've probably been the one that stuck through it the longest, right? And I was like,
absolutely.
Just, if something's working, keep doing it until you break it. So,
absolutely. And speaking about your background, so obviously you've had immense amount of success, just from everything from the athletic world to the training world. But talk to us more about the childhood. Where did that start?
I think growing up in Newark, New Jersey, and recognizing both my parents had their work ethic. I think from a mental aspect of things, my father, his background from the religious aspect of life was scholar and reading and diving deep into different literatures. For my mom, it was her desire and her work ethic to overcome some of the things that she had to overcome in her life. And so that just really imprinted in my mind, like, man, I love the fact that they want to go out there and be the best version of themselves. When my father passed away when I was 9 and things in our environment were getting a little bit more challenging, my mom and my grandmother, my father's mom, decided to have her boys go to live with my grandmother in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I think that's where things just kind of shifted for me, recognizing, hey, I'm going into 8th grade. I love football. I didn't know what organized football was all about, but I just loved it. I loved seeing it on TV. I loved going out and playing sandlot football and being super engaged into it. I mean, it was just awesome. But also I had this kind of weird desire to train and work out, not knowing anything, but just like, hey, if you run up and down the street and, man, you feel out of breath, whoo, that's pretty good. If you do a couple push-ups, whoo, man, oh, man, my arms are burning. Oh, this is going to get me stronger. But I think that plus just the desire to be fit, to be in shape, and to explore the options of what the world of fitness looks like and athletics look like. That's where it all started. That was where the foundation had me.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think when you had your child, obviously you go from a guy who had the passion and you developed a love for sports and getting in shape and taking care of yourself. But aside from the actual physicality part of it, what were some of the most impactful people that you had growing up? Because that has to have a tremendous role to how you became a professional athlete.
Sure. When I look back on my time, I recognize this phrase, and I mentioned it with Lee just now as far as the walk beside. And simply put, the walk beside is where, certain people, they kind of walk in front of you. They know what they know. They're talking to you, but they're kind of talking through you or at you or below. You're down here, they're up here. Then there's those people that kind of walk behind you. Yeah, go ahead, do what you do. They don't necessarily support you fully. But then there's those unique relationships that you have. It's called the walk beside. And I think those are the mentorships, the friendships. You go to the deep. You don't necessarily have to live in the deep, but you go to the deep. When you go to the deep, there's a healthy respect there. And I feel like there have been these key people and these key moments in my life that helped me in my walk beside. My grandmother, from my mom working multiple jobs to help raise her 3 sons. That was tough and challenging for her. And at the same time, my grandmother in her, at that time, late 70s, taking on 3 boys who are in their teen years and their rebellious years, for her to do what she does and provide for us a sense of structure and family. That was important. Going to Wilkes-Barre, you went to one high school where it was 8th through 12th, and recognizing that this is different from an educational standpoint than what I had in Newark, New Jersey. And being in that environment, it was extremely challenging for me. But again, here comes the walk beside. People showing up in my life, key people at key point in times. Mr. Frassini, my guidance counselor, just a wonderful man who really, I think, set the tone for me and my brother, because in our minds, you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to play professional football. I want to go to the NFL.
Right.
I didn't know how the path was supposed to be. All I knew was that, wow, what they did, I like playing football. I want to be a professional football player. When I look at the bigger picture, looking back on it, Mr. Frassini bringing in a guy by the name of Paul Lott. Paul was a senior, black kid who, at that time, his family, very influential family in the city of Wilkes-Barre, and he started up a friendship, a mentorship, older brother type of thing, where he was explaining to us how we had to do academically. Amazing, awesome experience for me to be able to see and understand, like, wow, okay, this is what I need to do to help myself. Cool, let's go. My brother and I, my younger brother and I, close, don't get me wrong, but my older brother and I, we're 11 months apart. And literally, we went to high school together. My father, when he was alive, he literally was like, all right, Raghib, you're going to start first grade, and Qadry, you're right behind. Okay, you're just going to start together. Mm-hmm. So because he was older, he actually was, I guess, if you will, in a position where he was an older first grader, whereas I was a very young first grader. Nonetheless, we went through school together. So that friendship, that relationship, really forged a strong bond between us. And so when we were in Wilkes-Barre, we really had to depend on one another. And that cool back and forth of just the different experiences of athletics and being, together, really, I think in those early years, that 8th, 9th grade years, really influenced us. I think kind of set the tone for our later years of success.
especially going to college, NFL, all there's the whole background. So, but I think that gave you a competitiveness between the two of you too. The love was there, but then also the competitiveness to help push you to some of the places that you've been to, because you're both track stars, right? And then of course football. So, but I'll let you get into some.
Yeah. I'm really curious to hear, where did that competitive drive, come from? Is it the brother? Is it just something that was intrinsic? Where did that come from?
So it's interesting. I think a sibling rivalry wouldn't necessarily be a true sibling rivalry, which you would know as far as like fighting like cats and dogs. Do we have our brother, squabbles? Absolutely. Every brother, sister, whatever does. But I think it ended when we went to Wilkes-Barre, and I realized I needed to depend upon him. He was my best friend. But like to your point, there's a competitiveness of wanting to do your best. And I think for my brother, everyone knows him as his nickname, the Rocket. Well, I vividly remember this point in time. We were both in 8th grade, and he was doing starts out of the starting blocks for a track season. And he was going up against some juniors and seniors. And my brother was extremely talented, extremely fast. They called him a Rocket. Well, this is how the nickname came about. Boss Cross was our head coach. And he was sitting there, and they were doing starts, and my brother was like, boom, just getting it. And so these seniors were like, wow, look at this young cat. Man, this dude is really getting it. And it was like, hey, Rocket. Man, nah, we're going to call him Rocket. Yeah, and my coach is like, he's a rocket in the pocket. I vividly remember that one and only time where I'm like, I'm not fast like that. I can't come out of the blocks like that. And a couple of track meets we'd run the 100 together. And I remember I'd run a 12.6 seconds. He'd run a 12.2 seconds. And, here we are and running down. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to do something different. So my competitiveness but also realization of recognizing, my talent is there, but I need to figure out like what I want to do. And I think that was the one and only time that maybe that sibling rivalry was a jealousy in the sense like, golly, how come I can't? But I remember fueling it into doing the hurdles, and which was my passion. And it turned into, I was like, all right, I'm going to be a sprinter, but I'm going to also be a hurdler. And so I was a 110 meter high hurdler from 8th grade on into my senior year, and obviously into college. But I was a 110 meter high hurdler, 300 meter hurdler. We both came together as a 4x100 meter relay team. And then obviously my senior year of high school, he joined up with me for the 4x4, 400.
That's awesome.
Each of us would run a 400, and 2 other guys as well. That being said, that competitiveness, that 8th grade year, that sitting there, that vision of like, man, I got to change.
Right.
This isn't for me. And I think, the looking back on it, but also seeing what I see now, sometimes it's okay to be like in your comfort zone of knowing what you know, but then it's also good to realize, hey man, this area isn't for me. What are my strengths? And be okay with, hey man, you're faster than me. Good for you.
Right.
I love it. Let me motivate myself off of that. But let me still support you off of that. Because the backstory behind that, my brother and I, in our grandmother's house, mother of pearl, we're sitting there, we shared the same bedroom. Right. We had a queen size bed in a tiny, room on 17 Ray Street, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Look it up. And literally, like, he one of them dudes where he's like, all right, I'm gonna get up for school. Meanwhile, I'm like, yo, bro, we gotta go. I was a morning person. I'm like, yo, we gotta go. Come on, let's get up, let's go. But I think that accountability, that back and forth, that friendship, that walk beside, that was important for him to understand what he had to do to help himself be accountable for his actions. Right. So it wasn't necessarily, easily if I could have been in my feelings to the point where the jealousy would have been, I don't really care, and been ignorant about the bigger picture. Heck, those moments would have been, well, my brother's ineligible to play because he slept through so many times at school. But no, it was about okay, I understand what you do. Let's understand how the bigger picture of how we
have each other's
can
back.
do it.
Right.
And that's something that I feel like gets overlooked very often. When you have a sibling rivalry, I should say, or even a friend that you're really close with, that's something that a lot of people get very envious of.
Yeah.
And the issue becomes, it's not like, let me push you. I know myself. I'm figuring out myself, and I know you do this very well, but I do this very well.
Yeah.
And that's part of that process. I mean, that's a super important thing to have with a brother, and I think that's why you got to where you were and why he got to where he was.
One of the reasons, and I'm big into giving people their flowers, because I think oftentimes, this world we do feel and hear a lot of criticism internally and externally. You talk about the 8 years. So here's your flowers that I feel confident in giving you. Yes, you have a real estate company. But in the years, what motivates Qadry to get up to work with Lee Tessier and have him do what he does, to see now our relationship, from Austin's perspective, like Austin, when he was in 7th and 8th grade, like now that mentorship that I had with him, seeing him working in your environment, the flowers is this. Not one time in that 8-year span, we're on a podcast, so I can say it, you weren't sitting there bitching. Right. You weren't sitting there in your ego. What does that mean? Here's Lee coming up in here saying, I want to get better. I want to be willing to work. But also he had the accountability to be like, well, can I, anybody else want to come along? And then bringing in he doesn't, what I appreciate about you, you don't say, well, my workers. No, you're like, yeah, my team. I want to bring in some people to come in, my team to come in and work with me. And that's a level of walk beside, because at the same time, it's, game recognizes game. What does that mean? When you see a successful person, and it's not about the jealousy, it is about like, how can, you do what you do successfully. I do what I do so successfully. But how can we do it together?
Right.
What are our blind spots? What are those blind spots that, as a company, as an organization, how do we work and fit together? And I think if you can put the ego down, which you've done so many times, it is empowering to those around you. My thinking is this. So goes the head, so goes the rest. When I look back on my childhood growing up and my successes, literally those successful times were when I saw people who were in authority have no ego, and all they wanted to do was be servant leaders. In that, it creates a creative work environment that leads to others helping one another achieve goals that ultimately, if one eats, they all eat. A high tide raises all ships. Let's go.
Right. Yeah, I think of the mornings. So the early on, like the second year with you, I had brought half the team. My mother-in-law in her 60s, Joe in her 60s. So, and you took it easier on someone, but although Joe stands out to you, right? Joe was like turning colors and everything else, and thankfully it wasn't an intense workout, but I think of that, and then that transpired over the years. Of course, we went to Wegmans, we went to the Vitamin Shop, we went to the gym, so all three places. It wasn't just one thing. So you look at the whole model of like, what do you need to do, because it's 80% of what you're doing is what you're eating, let alone anything else that you're putting in your body, vitamins, so forth, and you're very more holistic to that. And then I think over the years, then bring in like Austin and Brendan and Lisa came and Josh Miller, like all the different ones that have come, and then we would work out together, and that was such a good thing, because I always teased and said he was our rare bit, 23 years old, and give me something to chase it, here I'm 40, like 47, 48. But it just gave that competitive spirit. It's a mind clearing thing. It's working together. Again, I think when you're talking about as the head goes, so does the tail, basically. But I think leadership is such an important thing, rather than like I always believe in walking the walk, not talking the talk. And I think that's so much of what you're saying of like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to walk beside you and show you what to do. And that was the difference in your training too, because I was like, I remember those bands in the very beginning. I was like doing wall walks, and I'm like out of shape. So, and I was like, man. Now I look at it, I'm like, I'll do 60 push-ups and 60 push-up pulses at a time.
Correct.
We're doing bear crawls, doing 10 on every field, and all of a sudden I've done 600 push-ups in a workout. I'm like, shit, no wonder. I was playing golf the one day. I was like, man, my triceps are sore. I don't remember what, but I just think of how our workouts changed over the year, but also bringing in like Austin and Brendan and Reed. Reed for years was coming in too, and I think that. Then his son's coming in for track training. Then you're his track coach. It's like, so I think that we interweave so much of our lives together of people. But when the what is it? When the teacher's ready, when the student's ready, the teacher shows up, right? So I think that happens so much in life, but we're not connecting the dots. Sometimes we're not realizing like, hey, this person came in my life for a reason.
Right.
And I think going back to your childhood, where you're talking about, I don't remember your teacher's name, but I think she was like
Mrs. Latinsky.
Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking of like other people that you said made huge influences in your life, which was like very monumental, I would say, from what I was hearing. So like, let's talk a little bit about that, of how she made a difference in your life to be where you're at now too.
Absolutely. It's funny because for me, I get a very joyous, thankful feeling when I think of Mrs. Latinsky. Mrs. Latinsky, our homeroom teacher when I was at Myers had a sabbatical, Mrs. Brown. And so, she was on her sabbatical. In comes this Italian woman, Mrs. Latinsky. And, I'm like, all right, I don't know. I'll never forget when I was sitting there in homeroom. I had my guy, Sean Foley, who he's a doctor of physical therapy now. I had my guy, Jeff Namey, who is I believe he's a heart surgeon, who was sitting in front of me. I had my friend, Jen DeSoy, who Jennifer is a graduate of Notre Dame law and very successful lawyer, and has 3-4 kids of her own, very successful. And I had Tom Karpovich, and literally this dude was like Mr. A. So all of them, I remember we got our report cards, and I'm like, oh wow, what y'all good? Oh, look at that, one letter. Oh, look at all those letters, just the same one. Oh, you got the same letter too. Oh,
starts tucking in the book bag.
I looked at mine. I was like, mother of pearl. I had all kind of letters on mine, and unfortunately, I had one of the letters that none of them had. That was the letter E, and I'm like, man, whoo, that letter E. Whoo. Oh, y'all don't have any? Yeah. Hey, look, I got an A in physical, fitness gym. But Mrs. Latinsky, she was awesome, and she was very encouraging to me as far as helping me in navigating that early year. Well, fast forward to my senior year, after speaking with Mr. Frassini, after recognizing that, I can overcome and I can get back on track, which I did. 8th grade, 9th grade, turns into, 10th grade, starts the recruiting process of football. And, now all of a sudden, I'm like, big fish, little pond in Wilkes-Barre when it comes to, the notoriety of the athletic accomplishments. Well, from an NCAA standpoint, you have to have a minimum requirement to get into college. Obviously, I had a grade point average of 3.0, but I needed an SAT or ACT score to get in. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Latinsky, we're at a function, and I'll never forget, I'll go up to her, I say, hey, Mrs. Latinsky, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Qadry, how are you doing? And you know how sometimes mentors, they just be getting right to the chase. It ain't about like all this fluff. Yep. She's like, how are you doing? I was like, I'm doing all right. And she basically was saying, I know I've seen, you in the paper quite often, but, how are everything as far as your grades and stuff? So I started talking to her, and then, she just kept looking at me, and I was like, okay, I'm not doing well as far as trying to qualify for the SAT. And she was like, this is unacceptable. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to come over to my house, and we're going to tutor you. And I was like, yes, ma'am, okay. Literally.
She didn't ask. She told me. Exactly.
But, it was awesome because track season is coming up. Track season is spring sport. That was in the wintertime. And so, literally, I remember looking back on it. It was 17 straight weeks. And it was starting in the winter through track. And literally, Mr. Latinsky, he was a rival high school's principal. So the PIAA had a meet official at every track meet. So during the wintertime, she would either come pick me up or Mr. Latinsky would come pick me up, 17 Ray Street. They'd pull up, I'd come in, boom, go over to her house. Mrs. Latinsky was an Italian woman, so I was eating good. And, I'm sitting there and we're going through technology now. We had the slowest computer with the little floppy disk.
Yeah.
We had now you're reading, so you're reading a lot, and she's giving me these understandings of different phrases and context clues and all that and strategies. And it was awakening. It was alive. It helped me, and like I was just stimulated by it. Again, she was just walking beside me. Track season comes. She's like, all right, got you. Well, we'll see track season 2. I was like, okay. So sure enough, Mr. Latinsky was our starter. I was like, oh, hey, Mr. Latinsky. Huh. And again, he's our starter again. So years later, I'm sitting there, I'm speaking at my hometown in front of 3,000 people. My degree from Syracuse is speech communication. I do public speaking, all that, get paid very well for it. And so I'm at this banquet, and I'm the keynote speaker, boom, boom, boom. I'm busting it out. Again, I'm giving flowers to Mrs. Latinsky because of her just awesomeness that she had an effect on me. After I finished speaking, and Mr. Latinsky comes up to me and goes, hey, Qadry, what you don't know is Mrs. Latinsky was like, oh, Phil, you will put down, you're going to do every Myers track meet, and you're going to go pick him up. So I look back on that, and for me, Mrs. Latinsky, like, without her walk beside and her just diligence and just awesomeness of opening up 17 weeks of her time, we're talking 2-3 hours a night, where, Syracuse doesn't happen. Right. I don't get a chance to go to Syracuse. Yeah. I don't get a chance to understand, what it's like to do college courses and have a chance to run track and meet other mentors at that time at Syracuse. I miss out on all that opportunity. Right. But it was a lady who saw me in 8th grade, this little black boy and this, Italian woman sitting there, and I'm sitting in front of all my friends, and they all got, that one letter grade A, and she's seen this multi-looking, colorful report card. But it was her pouring into me that, I'm forever grateful for what, the influence she had on me. Yeah. And I see it to present day, which it continually motivates me when, for example, I gave you your flowers, Austin. I look back on Mrs. Latinsky like, wow, here comes Austin, his dad and I, you realize, you got sons, Dad, I want to play football. Okay, cool. Right. You want to coach and want to volunteer. Well, I'm like, not only am I going to coach and volunteer, I'm going to make sure my kids are getting it done right. And so through his father and his coaching at Bel Air Terps, we forged a relationship, and I was like, all right, cool. You go ahead, be the head coach and be all this. I'll just organize everything. Right. I'm making sure where our practice schedule is going to be this way. We going to condition this way. But I remember Austin was a little dude. He was like one of the littlest dudes. And what I respected and appreciated was that your level of commitment to listening. And I think back when I look at young people, I've been blessed to coach track and field for well over a decade and a half. I've mentored many a young person, but it's the art of listening that I see young people struggle with. The art of listening has to come down to this. When it's taking in information, however it's audible, however it's tactile, or however it's a visual, it's listening, seeing, understanding, and then doing what you've been told, and then modifying it accordingly, and then being able to articulate or say it back to the coach. So now you have that relationship. Correct. That was Austin. And so I never forget the one time Austin was struggling, and they all were, it's kids. Football is a collision sport. Right. Austin's not that big of a kid, but his asset was speed. And I'm like, listen, I don't know about you, Austin, but we need you. We cannot have you shrink back. So that being said, I'm doing this tackling drill, and it has to be done correct. I want you to buzz your feet, close the gap, come under control, and hit with your chest up, eyes up, so you can be able to tackle, avoid concussion. And it's a very physical drill. Those guys are straight struggling through it.
Yeah.
But again, they were like, you could just see that, like, Austin would go ahead and frown his brow like this. And you're like, all right, he's locked in. He's ready. He's like, all right, coach, I'm ready. So one time it was like drizzling. It was raining out. And literally, I'll never forget, because I felt one of the things that helped me. And I see it again through you. And this is, again, giving you your flowers. But for Austin, literally, when you have team meetings, what is the purpose of a team meeting? Is it to just waste everybody's time? All right, we're just going to be talking to talk? Oh, let's go over the numbers. Okay, how many houses did you sell? Okay, how many about this, huh? All right, that's a waste of time.
Right.
Okay. Or are you being of purpose? Are you being of value to one another? Are you being able to go to the deep and go to the real? For me, I felt regardless of age, we need to have a call-out session. A call-out session is when you have a relationship with one another. When you admit your mistakes, and you admit when you're wrong, and when you admit that you don't know it all, but you do have a level of authority with that person, when it's the walk beside time, and that time it was a drizzling day, and it was a not so good a practice, but we are a good enough team that we're going to face another team in the playoffs, and we had a chance to beat that team. I was like, nah, today is the day we're going to have this call-out session. Calling out is not talking down, it's talking with. Mm-hmm. Calling out, I remember calling everybody out. And I remember Austin, proud brow, helmet on. Everybody had their helmet on. It was just drizzling it out. And I'm like, all right, Austin. So I'm talking to everybody. And I remember looking at Austin. I said, Austin, this is the deal, bro. When are you going to realize we need your big play? When are you going to realize we need you to show up? When are you going to realize, because it wasn't that you didn't realize it, but we needed 4 quarters of it. We didn't need that first quarter when you were all fresh. We needed when you was tired. We needed that encouragement for you to talk to your other teammates when they were all fear and doubt. Being able to talk to Austin and being able to set that up for you and helping you understand gave me the freedom and liberty to now. It's like, wow, okay, we know Austin is one of our best players. If he's talking to him like that, then it allowed, and here's the key word, allowed me to open up to the other boys and encourage them. And in that allowance, that's where you could see where Austin and I was like, all right, guys, go ahead, break it down. Austin, they broke it down, and off they went. But it was the relationship after that, and it was the team bonding after that that I felt was so significant for you. And I see it now as a young man in your work life. Obviously, we have social media, so you get a glimpse of things that people see. And I love your attitude. I love the way you go out there. And it's not about Austin, but it's about, hey, man, let's go ahead and let's do this thing together. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that about you. But it was Mrs. Latinsky that forged me to help the people like the Austin Chavises of the world to be in this position that we see right now.
I greatly appreciate that. I think it chokes me up sometimes because when you start to develop yourself as a man, you realize, and when you mature, that there's people and pivotal moments of your life that allow you to think the way you do. Mm-hmm. And usually it's moments that made you very uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And everybody has those things. Lee, you have them. You've had them, clearly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think when you realize that, and you become a man, you search for that, and you honestly search it by helping the younger person that needs that.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think one thing, adversity. It either you're the one thing from football, you get so many different sayings that coaches say over the years, and I remember either the pressure of the moment is either going to burst the pipe, or it's going to be a pressure of a coal turning into a diamond. And yes, so from a physical aspect of things, I recognized a long time ago, I have bad eyes. And I remember from a forging of those bad eyes and not necessarily being bullied, but being bullied because I couldn't catch consistently. And here I am as a wide receiver, and I'm like, man, I got to figure out how to catch this ball because that's my job. But being in fear of, oh my gosh. But I think the quote-unquote turning yourself from a boy into a man comes through the forging of the fire, comes through adverse moments like recognizing your weaknesses, but also asking and being mature enough to ask for help. And so for me, it was, yes, the Mrs. Latinskys of the world, but then as I've grown, it was, the Coach Roberts of the world. It was Dr. Conway, Dr. Conway, chiropractor, who literally, he far surpasses normal chiropractic because of his soft tissue work and his desire to push forth and be that person to help heal people. Like, remember, he and his family helping me when I'm sitting there, in my junior year, like, I need to play. And I need to figure out how to go about being a better player. And he's like, Qadry, I'm there to help you out. And I remember specifically him coming home from work, had his own practice, huge business practice. Oh my gosh, had like 4 or 5 associates underneath him. And he'd be coming home. I'll never forget, we had a layout in the one paper, and I remember the photographer snapped a picture, and he was letting out this big yawn as he was putting on his cleats. Well, he just came back from 11-hour day, and now he's coming in getting ready to work me out. And here I am, just college kid, like, all right, let's go. And I realized his commitment to helping me be the man that I had to become. I realized when it came to being a professional athlete, here I am, made it, drafted, the whole 9 yards, but I still couldn't see. And my corrective lenses, I'll never forget, Dr. Saber. Dr. Saber wasn't an athlete, very cerebral guy, you would call him, kind of like a geeky nerd. Man, I love me some Dr. Saber. Here comes Dr. Saber sitting there, and I'll never forget sitting in his office and doing the eye exam. And I'm like, I don't know, I can't see. But he was like, listen, there are some companies that are out there that have certain prescriptions that you can kind of go with, but none of them are going to really truly address your needs. And I remember he's like, I'm willing to commit if you're willing to commit. We'll figure this out. My job was on the line, and I'm like, if you can help me, I'll be forever indebted. Let's go. Right. Sunsoft was the name of the company that he did his research with, and he kept on like tweaking my lens until I had the perfect lens, and then even then it was keep on, and then we did vision therapy. And I remember doing the vision therapy work, and I'm sitting there, and he was like just working with me. And I'll never forget, I got such great visual acuity that it was like my peripheral vision when I would look and we'd do my eye exam. I was like, I was 20/10 in one eye. Excuse me, here I go with my little sensitiveness. I was 20/10 in one eye, 20/15 in the other eye. And literally, I was 20/40 when I first started, and I was 20/30 in the other, and I couldn't see worth a lick. Literally, I'd be like, oh, wow, I can see crystal clear. Oh, that's depth perception. Look at everything. I am seeing the ball. It was those relationships. It was the coal of me turning into the diamond, and really that refiner's fire. When you put in whatever impurities are going to rise to the top, and you can go ahead and get it off when the refiner's fire is blowing on you. Mm-hmm. And that is what I am saying when I say the walk beside the Mrs. Latinskys of the world, the Dr. Conways of the world, my brother and I, and the forging of our relationship when we're going from Newark to Wilkes-Barre, like, what the heck, trying to figure out ourselves. When I look at the relationships that I've had over the years with just these phenomenal young people like yourself who literally keep me up on my toes, help me refer back to the times that I was like, oh yeah, I remember those times. Here's how you got to look at it. Here's how you got to address it. That's the empowerment element of it all. And that's where I am so thankful for those people, but I'm also thankful as I even look forward. It might have been those 8 years. You're right. That first workout looked way different than what you're doing now. But I promise you this, it's not me just resting on where I'm at right now. Mm-mm. It's not me just resting on like, oh, well, I can give you a workout. No, it's like, what does Lee need now that he probably weren't be able to handle then, but now how can I continue to help the Lee Tessiers, plural, of the world? Because again, you reference back to Joe, one of your teammates. And yes, Joe is an older gentleman. Joe is going through what we call, and we all do it. I mean, after 25, we're all old. When you hit that 25th birthday, the insulin stops being your asset and it becomes a liability. Protein takes on a whole different level of form, and so when you at 25th, you're old.
Right.
Okay, we're just gonna say it. But metabolic health is what I'm into now in the short term of it all. And so now if I'm looking at a gentleman like Joe, I'm attacking it differently from an energetic standpoint to help him continue to do what he desires to do, which is live,
right.
which is be loving to his family. And yes, come into the work environment with, I mean, that dude has so much wisdom and understanding that he can give to a young person like this. Yeah, well, you're going to go through this experience with this type of a buyer and this type of a... Man, that's wisdom that you don't want him coming up in here, I really don't have time for you, Austin, right now, because he can't overcome some of the metabolic challenges that otherwise a young person like Austin wouldn't have to overcome. You know, that's my mindset when I look at the global, holistic approach of the why I do what I do. It's not just about working out. It's not just about, living off of the past, but it's the growth of the past that forges me to continue to stay present in present day, but also think about my future self. I wanted Austin to think about his future self with the rain drizzling down on him, to think about what he needed to do to help himself and his teammates for those 4 quarters in that upcoming game. But now Austin has something in his memory banks that he can draw upon that's going to help his future self. Well, his future self, as obviously we've spoken, were challenges that you had along the lines when you went through your baseball aspect of things. But that baseball challenging aspect of things helped you with your future self.
Correct.
When you talk about where you're at right now in the quote-unquote work environment.
Yeah.
Your future self is Lee Tessier sitting there with those bands. Lee's style game has like his fashion is up here.
Yeah.
But back in the day, I was like, bro, what you doing? He had these white shoes on that looked bootleg and literally some socks. I was like, okay, we need to go ahead and up it. Big time.
Shoes first.
No, he had the glove. He had the full glove.
Everything. But now it's funny because now when I train, I'm like, all right, everybody take off your shoes, take off your socks, here we go. But with that said, though, where Lee was actually looking at his future self and saying, at some point in time, I'm going to be 50, but what does that journey look like? Yeah. And what does it look like for me as I look towards my future self? That's my ultimate walk beside, my ultimate motivation, because there are times where you ain't going to have it every single day. There's going to be, oh my God.
Right.
But my ultimate motivation to me is looking at where I'm at right now, staying present, but looking to my future self and being like, all right, how can I get better as a person?
Yeah, that's so important. And I know when you're coming up throughout high school, you're figuring out who you are, right? It's that identity. Everybody in some sort of way is still figuring themselves out. There's always a weakness that we have. And you could talk about your struggles when you got recruited, right? Big fish, small pond. Now it's the opposite. You go throw yourself in the fire, right? And we talked about these experiences. So tell them more about once you get recruited, talk about that process, and now you enter college as a young adult.
Mother of pearl. Yeah. I mean, big fish, little pond. I mean, I was number 1 high school hurdler in the nation by Track and Field News. Went to nationals and won nationals from a football aspect of things. My brother and I, we were so heavily recruited, and it was just a pick of the litter. Right. You know, I was the guy. But then here comes the reality. When you get to college, everybody's the guy.
Yeah.
Everybody can play. And I think it was really, a challenge and a tough time for me, again, looking back on it. My God, man, like I was sitting there, and his name was Darryl Johnston. He, All-American, Syracuse, fullback, and he actually played for the Dallas Cowboys. Highly successful career. He actually now is a broadcaster. Literally has done amazing things for himself and his family. When we were at Syracuse, as a freshman, you had 3 days where you would go through your 2-a-day practices, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling good. These other freshmen, they're good, but I think I'm good. Everything's good. Then our head coach is like, all right, men, bring it around. So I'm gonna have our captain, Darryl Johnston, speak to you. So I'm sitting there looking at Darryl, and I'm like, all right, well, he's an offensive guard, offensive tackle, something, because the dude is big. Good. We're going to have a guy who's that big going to help us out. I'm like, yeah, okay, great. And they was like, yeah, he's a fullback. I'm like, well, he's what? If he's that big, well, how else? Man, when the vets came in, them dudes was like, all right, we're going to have the SU drill. And so it was a form tackling hitting drill. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm so scared. I was one of the weakest freshmen. Really struggled mightily my first year, and actually into like my first 3 years. Just a struggle after a struggle after a struggle, and trying to find myself. Like, I know I can play, but the inconsistencies, as I spoke about, as far as my vision, the inconsistencies as far as like, yeah, I'm weak, but how do I get strong? Well, getting strong obviously is training and working out. Had an amazing, again, here comes my head strength coach, Mike Wojcik, hard-nosed dude, strength coach, but through his grace, his programming was awesome. I still model programming of how to train people and see it through the way Mike Wojcik trained people. And he wasn't your typical strength coach. He had a track background, which thankfully I went to Syracuse, because there would not have been a two-sport All-American had it not been for Mike Wojcik giving the blessing to me to allow me to train and do winter and spring track as opposed to working out with the football team. So here's Mike Wojcik, who literally, he was like, man, Qadry, all you gotta do is come in, you get your lift in, and then you can go out to track. And so eventually, once I earned his trust, he literally was like, all right, what did you do today? Mike, it was a hard workout. All right, when is one of the championships? Well, the championships are all right. Well, I'm going to modify your program. And he was just awesome. Hard-nosed dude, didn't mess around or anything. But he was the first person that really taught me how to run and be fast and explosive and speed and all the things that I know now. I owe it to Mike Wojcik. So yeah, man, those I had some challenging years at Syracuse. I never forget. My brother went to Notre Dame. Physiologically, he was ready. Physiologically, my brother, I'll never forget, we talk about relationships and success. Success, it's interesting because when people become success, who you are comes out of you. Let me say that again. When you're going through the fire and, maybe it's financial, might be struggling, when you're sitting there and you are just like, I don't know when the next whatever, that's where you're like, okay, you're at your humblest, and but when you're successful and you get some money and or things are going well, the you and some of that darkness of you comes out.
I think an amplifier. I'll never forget. Money's such an amplifier, right? If you're a great person, sometimes it makes you better. You're an asshole, sometimes it makes you a bigger asshole.
Bigger asshole.
Right.
Well, I'm sitting there, and people want to go ahead, and there were some assholes because of the success of my brother. But I'll never forget this moment. I'm not a tearjerker guy, but this moment gets me because we're in college. I'm straight struggling, and here we go home for our winter break, and Notre Dame's playing for the national championship, and here I am. Syracuse, we were going down to a January 1st bowl, prominent bowl. At that time, it's called a Hall of Fame bowl. I think it's called the Outback Bowl now, down in Tampa. And we had a little bit of a break before we had to go off to our different bowls. The national championship game was played for Notre Dame against West Virginia in the Fiesta Bowl. And so we're sitting there, and teens, we like, yo, we're gonna go out. We're gonna go out to a little club that, hey,
swagger gun, yeah,
bruh.
yeah.
Well, he's getting ready, I'm getting ready, and I'm sitting there, and I thought about it. I was like, Raghib is chilling with me, and he is at his height of success. Like, we couldn't go anywhere in our hometown without somebody.
Candidate, right?
Well, he wasn't yet that year.
Okay.
But he was like,
dude.
Oh my God, he was the dude that beat the dude about the dude.
Yeah.
And literally, like, everyone was Notre Dame fans. Like, and it was just like, you could just feel the electricity in the air when we walked into a room because of my brother. And he was just the same person. And I'll never forget, I walked up to him, and literally I sat there. He was, getting ready. I'm almost ready. I was like, hey, Raghib, I just want to say, man, thank you for just being you. And, you're my brother, and I love you, and you're just you. And, he kind of was like, he wasn't necessarily emotional. He was my older brother, but he kind of like looked over at me, saw me, sitting there, and, he was like, oh, yeah, I got you. I love you, brother. And he gave me a big hug, and I'm sitting there like crying and everything. But it was cool because it was like, I look at success, and I have seen my fair share of it, along the lines. And I've seen my fair share of people who've had their successes and they're assholes. Mm-hmm. But that moment to me helped keep me grounded in the sense of, man, I don't care how great you are, how mighty you are, bruh. The people who matter, or you'll know that person's character when that person who you treat the same, whether it be the quote unquote cleaning person or whether it be a CEO of a company, and you treat them both the same with that level of respect. To me, that shows your level of who you are as a person of character, when that person who is a cleaning person can't really do anything for you, and you sitting there kissing ass on that CEO.
Right. And people remember that. Denzel Washington had a really good quote. He said, the devil taps on your shoulder at your highest moment.
Amen. Amen.
At your highest moment.
I think when you look at it, Denzel is a prime example. Like, height of heights, international, spirit of humility, bam, yeah, okay. Famous fleeting. This is a quote that was, I say it all the time, that was in our locker room. Our again, another mentor, our head coach, Coach Mickey Gorham, rest in peace. He had it hanging up in our locker room. It actually was right in the eyesight line, so it wasn't like one of them banners that were just up. It was right in our line. And famous fleeting. Popularity is an accident. Those who cheer you today will jeer you tomorrow. Wow. Those that have riches takes wings and flies away. But there is only one thing that will stand throughout the test of time, and it's a man's character. I remember that saying. I have, throughout my time, repeated that saying, again, giving flowers back to Coach Gorham. Character is everything. And when you look at, your level of adversity, famous fleeting. Bruh, I've seen many a famous person, and I've seen them the rise up, and I've seen the rise and the meteoric fall back down to earth. Popularity is an accident. Yeah, you could be popular. Oh, okay, great. Whoo! Especially nowadays with social media and all the easy access of being an influencer. Man, people are like, okay, what's the next thing? Okay, great. That's all well and good. Thank you.
Just impulse.
Yeah. Boom. Popularity goes into that money element of it all. Mother of pearl. I bet you right now, when you look at Stephen Jobs, if he was saying to himself, I know I got this cancer, but if I had a cure and I had to live my life or give up my wealth or be dead, right. I bet you that dude would be like, okay, what check do I need to write to keep my health?
Mm-hmm.
You can, okay, great. You're a successful person with money.
Right.
Good for you.
Right.
go ahead and lose that inner person.
So what was that like for you? Well, now you had success at Syracuse. You wind up, shining, coming comfortable in your own skin. Now you're a professional athlete. You get drafted, and now you have a little bit of money. Like you go from a broke college kid, now you got a little bit of money. What was the mentality there? Did anything change? Did you feel like anything changed from your perspective as a professional?
I think, again, for my family, what changed was my brother went through it before I did, and the wolves came out. We did not have good mentors in that realm of financial literacy, financial understanding. Wolves were just everywhere. My brother was on the cover of Sports Illustrated twice, and at that time, you get on the cover, you're the guy. And so everyone was like, just like, oh yeah, oh, we gotta, I wish I had someone talk to us about, the financial understandings. I think there were some people who, felt like they could help, but again, it wasn't the level of what we needed.
Genuine interest.
Yes. And I think, my mom, she struggled, mightily and had an extremely tough upbringing. I think, the level of success, it changed her, to put it mildly. And it really, I think, caused, us to be in some uncomfortable situations and conversations from a financial standpoint, It
Money's
really
hard
was
to talk
tough.
about.
Say,
Money's hard to talk about too in a family.
You
right?
could talk about sex all you want. You could talk about darn near drug addiction all you want and whatever addiction. But man, you go ahead, talk about finance.
Right.
How much you making? Right. And yeah, you're right. And I think that level of mentorship, it takes a special person. I had my team chaplain, Tom Lamphere, for the Minnesota Vikings. When I was drafted by the Minnesota Vikings, he brought me to New Era Financial. The gentleman's name was Grant Linderman, and Grant was just wonderful. He was that guy who, him and his partner, they we don't need you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
We gonna help you.
That's the type we get. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and dude was like, he was rock solid, steady. Just cautioned me off of a ton of things and put me in great position. I think that was awesome. I think that person was like,
Well, if you think back to school, I mean, you went to college, went to high school, it's like, but they don't offer much for financial end of things. Because even when we were training, and I said, hey, we're going to do Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, you even came, you're like, hey, you mind if I come? And I was like, yeah, come. It's going to be 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And I was like, I just want you to get value out if you're coming. But it was great because it gave them a great aspect that they didn't have or hadn't learned anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something I could just teach. I was like, hey, this is a great platform. Mm-hmm. Let's just use it.
Yeah.
So I think that, even showing up with your background, I was like, hey, I'll take some extra wisdom. Right?
Amen.
Yeah. Because
a wise man takes rebuke, but a fool rejects wisdom. And I think that is circling it back to our level of friendship, circling it back to why I am sitting here now. It's not just about me telling stories, but it's about, when this goes out to the public, it's about what can you glean from what we're talking about today. It's the gleaning of it all is for you, the listener, whoever you are, to hear it for yourself.
Yeah.
And if you need to listen to this a couple more times to hear it for yourself, so be it. One of the things that Lee and I, we'd go through was the way in which Lee would kind of think about things and talk about, his experiences with his father, and not talking to you like you're not here.
Sure.
Talking to, my guy.
Youngin right here.
But, he would sit there and talk about how his father was a worker. And I was like, yeah, my father was a worker. My father was a worker from a scholarly aspect. Lee's father was a worker from a business mind aspect of things. But it also forged Lee into like, okay, well... He would be like punching out numbers. I'm like, all right, Lee, hold on, let me get my calculator. Oh, you're right. Okay, Lee, I didn't even know all that. But what was so cool is like, this is the processing that I got to go through. Okay, great. So when, again, you sitting there saying, well, I got my team meeting today, Qadry, and we talk about our programming of what I wanted to do from a workout standpoint. And I was like, all right, bet. And then he was like, yeah, I got Dave Ramsey. I was like, yeah, I've heard of Dave Ramsey. That dude's gotten tremendous amount of people out of debt. I was like, look at Lee talking about, I was like, so what are you going to do? He goes, yeah, Qadry, I mean, Lee all like, Lee has his Lee voice.
Very soothing.
Very soothing, calm. But, here's the thing. Lee will tell you, but he's not going to beat you upside the head with it. I'm gonna tell you, and you're either gonna listen or you're not gonna listen. I'll tell you twice. You're either gonna listen or you're not gonna listen. The third time I'm gonna tell you, well, then I'm just gonna stop telling you.
True. Maybe 7 times.
Very
now.
true.
I know it's like takes 7 times for him to hear it.
Well, that seventh time, after that seventh time, it's like. So all I need to do is listen like a third time. I was like, wait a minute, you got Dave Ramsey, what now? Yeah. Well, who, what, where? So it to me, I remember that. Yeah, you're like, all right, yeah, come on into the office. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm coming into the office. Mm-hmm. Shoot, and it again, it's the acquiring of wisdom. Mm-hmm. A wise man takes rebuke, but it's a fool that rejects wisdom. Yeah. And I think, again, as a 52-year-old, my mindset is like, all right, there are ways that you can look at life and living. Mm-hmm. I want to look for my future self, and I want to look back on, I want a friendship and a relationship with Lee. I want a friendship and a relationship with Austin. Austin is in the area of his life where, yeah, cool, when you're at this point, you're going to be looking back and seeing who your relationships are. Right. And who you're going to be mentoring. And I can't wait to shake their hands and say, what's up? Yeah. I know for me, as for me and my house, this is the direction that I want to go in. Right. I know that mental health, physical health, literally I geek out, from a Dave Ramsey aspect of things, from a financial aspect of things. Yeah, I realize there's some billionaires who are void. They have no substance to them, yet they're billionaires. Multi-millionaires have this void in them because they have no idea. They have a talent, sure. They have a talent to make, financial gains, sure, great, but they have a void in them. I want to be well-rounded. I want to know, now that forging through the fire, mental health, I want to be rock solid with it. So I don't want to get caught up in, the big farm having to take some level of antidepressant. Right. I don't want to get caught up in big ag when it comes to helping myself from a nutritional aspect of things and eating things like high fructose corn syrup that is going to ravage my body. I don't want to go ahead and have highly processed foods that now, no matter what I'm doing, I can't concentrate and think and do what I need to do. I don't want to sit there and say, well, heart health is critical because cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. All right, so what do I got to do to avoid the number one dude trying to go ahead and take me out of this life? Correct. I want to be around for your grandson and see what he got going on. I want to see him and his brother Andrew be going out there, hanging out, playing. Your grandson has such a bright mind and wow, and inquisitive and wow, and doing things. Okay, I want to see that come to fruition as a young person. I can't see that if Lee ain't cognitively aware and doing what he's doing. The story isn't written yet is the bottom line. And I need to understand how are those people, like a Dave Ramsey, right, like I have a litany of health people that I look at, my Ray Peets of the world, my Morley Robbins of the world, my Peter Attia of the world, my Andrew Hubermans of the world. There's about 3 or 4 others that I've been this deep diving into, wow, this is the well-roundedness that we're talking about, that I'm okay, brain health, okay, mental health, okay, cardiovascular health, okay. Peter Attia, his book, Outlive, the ability to have longevity in your life. Sandra Kaufman, the Kaufman protocols as far as when you're talking about, that level of growth for yourself. After 25, them senescent cells don't mess around. Senescent cells, zombie cells. Zombie cells basically are cells within your body that autophagy hasn't gotten rid of. So if it hasn't gotten rid of it, then that means that it's going to slow you down. Wow. So if you cannot do what you need to do as far as your level of clarity of thought, you're going to have brain fog. If you're going to have brain fog, I know from poor movement, then you're going to have some injuries and inflammation that's going to start ravaging your body. You can either go it through the pharmaceutical way, and you're going to be giving them a heck of a lot of your money.
Just temporary impulses.
Right.
Exactly right. Or you're going to be going it through the agricultural way, and the agricultural way is going to lead you down a path of death, because there's a ton of highly processed restaurants that you can go ahead and divulge in or take part of. Yeah. But then all of a sudden you're going to be looking back like, man, I didn't live my fullness back then, and my future self is like, well, time is up.
That is so true. Your future self is almost like if you were, and people don't look at this way often, but if you look at it as like, what does my ideal self look like? And that's where it starts. Right? It's not just, what do I want? What does it look like? Having that picture. And I remember when he mentioned this, when he started training with you, here he comes, he was overweight, and you could tell more about that.
Oh, yeah. We always tease because they're like fat leaves on the side of our old moving truck, right? It was like, my face is this big, belly's big. I was like 255 pounds. I would weigh myself every day. Now I'm down to 217. I was graduated high school, I was 225. But I think of the pattern to get there and just the consistency with it. And it is like, I still like my potato chips, right? It's like certain things are your, vices, or especially when you're going through something mentally hard, right? It's like, but I enjoy, let me go for a walk. Let me try to if I go for a walk, then I'm thinking less about eating too.
Yes.
So I noticed that the other day. I was like, all right, I'm done dinner. I want some chips. Now I'm going to go so I walked, I had a Zoom call, so I ended up being on it for an hour.
Yes.
So I walked like 3 miles or something in an hour. I was like, all right, that was way better than eating potato chips. But
may I interject on that? And here's the future self, Qadry, current day, and how I'm just like beaming with pride with what you just said. So I could easily, not, just rest on my laurels, but being present right now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, cool. Yeah, well, see, if you just had the chip and I'm recognizing through Dr. Lustig's work and Dr. Ray Pete's work that the chip is made of sunflower oil, which is a PUFA, which is a highly processed oil that can damage your metabolism. At the same time, I'm also recognizing that, yes, literally, they're going to add in those added extra sugars to give you this taste that you're going to be addicted to, which inflames you, which, again, you're exercising. Based upon Peter Attia and his research, he's saying the number one thing you can do to prevent all-cause mortality, all forms of disease, is heavy resistance training and cardiovascular health, as far as like being able to get the heart rate up into an uncomfortable, just an uncomfortable way of being able to speak to one another. Whoo, boy, just enough from a heart rate standpoint. To your point, and this is how I'm like, yes, go Lee. Lee, if you are sitting there in inflammatory condition, you're going to have the brain fog, that you're going to be stressed out, that you're going to be like, man, you're going to stress eat. The pharmaceutical industry has got you, because now all of a sudden, I need to take something. But then at the same time, the agriculture, I got to do something. And then all of a sudden, your brain, which is freaking awesome, you ain't successful just because all of a sudden, but you got your talent. Your dad, of course, forged it in you, DNA-wise. Now you sitting there, you know what? Brain fog be damned. No, I'm going to go ahead and make a strong decision. We walked beside each other, 8 years of it all, but now you've empowered yourself to then get up. You go out, you're going out. Yeah, of course you're on the Zoom, but you made a cognitive choice to be outside. The vitamin D from the sun, going to go ahead and contact the skin. It's going to help you out in that regards. Then at the same time, your lung capacity is filling up. So now all of a sudden your brain is being stimulated. Your circulatory system is being activated even more so. That insulin is the glucose is going to your brain, but the insulin goes into the muscle as opposed to going to and sitting in on the liver, which of course is not good. You're helping yourself metabolically, which in turn, when you see the bigger picture, you're helping yourself metabolically, which in turn is helping you as far as your Zoom call, which is helping the people on the Zoom call. And then at the same time, now you're going to have the mental clarity of being able to do what is for free, which is sleep. You go to sleep, the hormones release, we can go ahead and be okay. So and then you wake up, you're all right.
Yep.
As you guys can tell, he knows his stuff. That's why he's one of the best trainers, or is the best trainer around. But that it all goes back to like a culmination of knowledge that you build from other people, and it's a team, right? So obviously everybody knows the elephant in the room. You won a Super Bowl. I mean, that's something that people would die for. what was the difference of that team, right? The culmination of one group of people coming together to create a desired result. That doesn't happen. His habits don't happen with a team of people around him with that support system, right?
So it's interesting because it's the 2000 Ravens team. The interesting thing about our 2000 team, literally when I look at that and how I got there, I was going through what I call my wilderness experience. It took the Israelites 40 years to make a 11-day journey to enter into what the promised land was. And literally that 40 years, they had to, because people doubted, they had to travel for that 40 years until that generation of those 40 people, or 40 years, those people who doubted were no longer living. To enter into their, well, I had to go through my version of what I call my wilderness experience, where I had to go to Miami, go to New Orleans, and really overly struggle and figure out me and get forged in the fire. So I know what Lee is talking about when he's like, put down the bag, get your butt up, put in the earbud, and go on outside and go for a walk. I was like, you talk about water? I was one of the first, if not the first, the water jug, bro. I tell people to this day, and then people be like, oh, I got my gallon of water jug. I'm like, yeah, good for you, bro. Back in the day, I had that sucker. Why? Because I was not going to be dehydrated in Miami, so Jimmy Johnson, the head coach, had no excuse of cutting me. Because I was like, if I get a pulled hamstring, I'm done. At the same time, from that aspect of going through the wilderness, I go and have a phone call with Brian Billick. Brian Billick was the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. He then gets an opportunity to become the head coach after the 1998 season. So the 1999 season, Art Modell hires him as the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens. Brian and I had a history together. Brian calls me up. Brian was like, come on in. Boom, I come in. Now I'm with the Baltimore Ravens. That 99 season, great season. It was the first non-losing season for the team. We go into 2000. I am the go-to receiver. I'm the guy. Shannon Sharp, Ray Lewis, and Rod Woodson, 3 Hall of Famers. We, of course, had some other Hall of Famers. Jonathan Ogden was on the team as well. But those 3 like the 3 amigos, and they set the tone as far as the leadership-wise. Well, I'm sitting there, and we're going through this year, and as I look back on it, from the energy of the room, mother of pearl, amazing team. Yeah, we all alpha males. Yeah, we all, egos and some sigma males up in there. Man, we were it just didn't matter. The offense had some major adversity. We were struggling as far as clicking in the red zone, so our scoring wasn't where it needed to be. But the defense, a historic all-time great, yeah, I said it, better than the Chicago Bears defense, but they were the all-time best defense ever. And yet, coaching staff-wise, player-wise, it all just worked. And that year literally was one of the hardest years for me. I had an MCL sprain on my left knee. I was like, I'll never forget going home during the season, and the home that we were actually renting out, literally I'd go into the garage, and the garage had an upstairs because the way the house was constructed. I'd walk up the stairs backwards because my knee was in pain from practicing on it. And literally, and again, that was another reason why I'm so into nutrition and inflammation and all that. But literally, the motivation to play and to go to work. Yeah, it was a professional environment. Yeah, but the characters we had on our team, the friendships, the belief in one another, no finger pointing when adversity came about. And then, I look back on it, I was like, for me, it was like, we won a game. We won a game. We won a game. We won 12 straight games, and when we get to the playoffs, it's like we beat the Denver Broncos at home. We got to go to Tennessee. Man, this is our arch rival. Going to Tennessee, and place was deafening, and you could hear nothing. Yet at the same time, play here, play there, play here, play there. Next thing you know, all of a sudden we win, and it's like, oh, we gotta go to the AFC Championship game. Go to the AFC Championship game again. Playing against the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders. The black hole, all that. Oh, my God. I remember the FBI, they would come in and they would give us, their spiel on what, we need to look out for and all the different things. Well, the local police also came in and talked to us. Like, listen, here's the deal. We love you guys. Think you guys are going to do great, whatever. When y'all go into the black hole, please recognize an older stadium. It's a baseball stadium. Oakland Athletics, play there as well. You need to have your helmet on, walking in and out of the tunnel. Don't go to the crowd and bother them.
Right.
Don't do anything. They're going to throw stuff at you. And I was like, okay. And back in my Vikings days, real quick, the Mile High Stadium back then, like Denver Bronco fans, especially if it was snowy, they put little batteries and snowballs and throw them at us. So we knew, I was like, okay, well, I'm not taking off my helmet because it's going to be sunny and hot out in Oakland. I ain't having no beer bottle thrown at me. Bruh. All that adversity, but we whooped up on them. And this is so funny because I'm like walking around the stadium like, yeah. And some of the crowd was going, but the crowd that was there, I was like, yeah, I had my helmet on. Whew, a beer bottle came past me. I was like, whew, put my helmet back on. I went over and celebrated with my teammates. But going down, playing against the Giants in Tampa, was just a dream, like dream come true, childhood dream of that little boy saying he wants to play in the NFL, and all the mentorships and all the things led up to that moment where I'm like, wow, this is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And walking away as Super Bowl champion, it's just I know what it is like when other teams of different sports win their ultimate championships, from the World Cup to the World Series to the NHL. It doesn't matter. I understand, and I'm like, man, I understand how they're feeling, that euphoric feeling, all that hard work, all that adversity, and it paid off.
That's awesome.
I always think of it's always the journey, not the destination, though, right? It's like the journey was so good to get there. When you get there, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. I mean, which I'm sure you celebrated for a little while, but I think it's always the journey. So many people get hung up on, hey, this is my destination, and then their destination changes.
Yes. Really. I think when you look at life, there are the art of it all. If I were to leave it at this, the art of it all, yes, you do have a desire to be in the NFL, but it's being caught up in the processes. When you start getting caught up in the processes and you realize those processes, that's where the true fun of it is. It doesn't matter sports, doesn't matter, family, home life, it doesn't matter professional life outside of professional sports. It's the caught up in the process. I got to take a test. Well, all I know is I got to start where? Well, I got to start with the process of what is the flow of what I want to start with, what that theme is, whatever that theme is. Then that process takes and comes to fruition. And then I think there's people around you who are willing to go with you through that process, which is what I've been saying, is the walk beside.
Absolutely. And the process wasn't week one or preseason of that year that you did win it. It was little Qadry playing in the sandlot, having those experiences, those going through the fire, coming out of it, going back in it, getting back out of it. That created that result, and in a subconscious journey. And I think that just hearing that story is just so impactful. And if you can get a word of advice to a young kid who's probably lost a little bit, or he's trying to figure out his way, what do you tell that 17-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid, even 25-year-old kid figuring his way through life?
It's interesting because I've had those, again, Austin Chavis in the rain conversations so many times with so many people, and I recently had it with one of my athletes, and basically it's being real, it's being blunt and honest, and you have to, if there is the light of things, the light would be, for me, as I look back on it, my sophomore year, I finished third in the state in 110-meter high hurdles. And I tell people all the time, I was like, yeah, I finished third in the state, but from that point on, I never lost again. And then I look back on it, and I was the number one high school hurdler in the nation. Okay, so that was the fun of it all. But what you didn't see was when I had to get up on the Saturday morning practices because our coach was a psycho. No. Shout out to Coach McGrain. But no, he would have us do 4 600s, 4 600s, 4 300s, 4 200s. And literally, there were times where, not knowing nutrition is the way I do now, but I wouldn't eat the correct way, and I'm like, throwing up my pseudo breakfast. And, you know, those times helped me to realize when I went to our state meet and we had the 110-meter high hurdles, prelims, semis, and then finals, 300s, trials and finals, 4x4, trials and finals, 4x1, trials and finals. And that's a heavy workload packed into 2 days. And how do you overcome all that to then, yes, do what hadn't been done before? So I'm in the Track and Field Hall of Fame for the state of Pennsylvania, and they have 2 divisions, AAA, AA. We're a AA because our school size, and that's it. Other states have multiple divisions. Well, when you have, and Pennsylvania is a very large state, when you have those 2 divisions, there's a heck of a lot more competition.
Yeah.
Right.
Bruh. And in that truncated time, literally, you got to be on your game. Here's my point. If I'm talking to a young person, you got to be real with yourself. You got to see the ugly. What is the ugly? Okay. So are you really willing and ready to do what you need to do? If I have that relationship with that person, it might even get a little bit deeper, a little bit darker, if you will. I might have a call-out session. Honestly, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think you're ready.
Right.
I don't believe you want it bad enough. Or if that person, I'm not there yet with them, I am going to help them understand. I have been where you're at. I know what it's like to be that 17, 18, 19-year-old. I've been in that position. I've been on the bench. I've been on as a starter. I've been the guy that beat the guy. I've been in that situation where it's like everything is on me. I've been that guy that was benched. I've been that guy that was scolded. I've been that guy that was lazy. I've been all those. So a wise person is going to take the correction, or you're going to be a fool and reject the wisdom.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how I would go about that conversation to that young person.
I think the sacrifices that they need to give, like they have to figure out what their sacrifices are going to be if they're going to go after that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know until you're halfway into it, and it's like, all right, I had to give up a whole lot. You know, I think of my career as like giving up so much time with family.
Yeah.
Because I had my long days. I was 8 in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night, right? And I was like, you do that multiple days. Now you're missing kids' games. You're missing birthday parties. You're missing these things. Like, people see the iceberg, right? I think there's one around. Yeah, there's one right here.
Yeah.
So it's like you see this much at the top, but not all of this.
Yes.
And sometimes it's this.
Yes.
But today, everybody wants to do this much work to get all this.
Something will always suffer if you really want to accomplish elite level stuff. Something's going to suffer. You can't. You can only deposit so much. But I don't want to hold the audience too long. Qadry, I greatly appreciate you taking the time. I think your story is tremendous, and I want to say thank you to the bottom of my heart, because without you, as a trainer and as a mentor and as a great friend, I could not be where I am today. Like you said, there's a team of people, and you're definitely one of those people in my life, and I'm blessed to have that, and I'm sure.
I ditto that because health. That was like borderline high blood pressure, borderline high cholesterol. I'm like, all right, I'm going to fix it. I'm not taking medication. The doctor's like, you want medication? I'm like, no, I'm not doing medication. And then you came into my life probably like within the next 6 months. I'm like, all right, now I'm in a good, I had that plaque scan on my heart, 0%. And I was like, all these good things. But thank you so much for all that.
Amen. Thank you both.
Where's the best way that these people can get in touch with you or do research for your training? What's the best way to contact you?
Easiest way is my website, missiletraining.com. But obviously, if there's, technically young and old, it doesn't really matter. If you want to go to Instagram, direct message me there. I am Qadry Ismail 87 on Twitter. Direct message me there. I'm very easy to find. MissileTraining.com is the easiest, quickest way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Qadry, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We look forward to the next episode.